Hey there, welcome to Homeschooling with Grace. This is your host, Erin Cox, and I am sitting in my car attempting to do a podcast episode for you. So, I am going to try, if you're new to this podcast, which anyone that finds it is because no one listens to it. But if you are new here, I'm going to try to start doing some car chats a couple times a month just so I can post a little bit more consistently. And I know a lot of people prefer video content. So I decided instead of making it complicated, I'm going to come sit in my car where it is mostly quiet. And you might hear my husband drive by on a tractor. We'll see. And I decided I wasn't going to make a fuss out of anything. I was just going to come out here and do it. So let's get to it. Today, we are talking about two things. I wanted to talk to you about our family's curriculum plans for the 2025-2026 school year, in which our boys will be in the 3rd and the 4th grade. But I also, by virtue of talking about that, want to also talk to you about Sequence 2. So if you are an existing general classical family, you know what the general classical press is, you've maybe used Sequence 1 and you're wondering, where is Sequence 2? What are the plans with that? When is that coming out? All of those things. We're going to talk about that as well. So that's what I'm going to jump into first, because historically, we have created a new curriculum for each age that our boys have attained. It's literally why I create the curriculum, is for my boys to be able to use it. And this is the first year that I've not created a complete full year homeschool curriculum program for them. And it left me floundering just a little bit, and it may have left you. So why have I not created it? There are a couple of reasons why. First of all, I only create things when I have a really clear vision and I feel like God has called me specifically to work and create that thing. And that feeling, that normally it's not just like a feeling, it is kind of like a more of a, it's coming at, I have clarity and vision, number one, but also I feel like the Lord's coming at me in kind of all different directions, showing me like, it's time to work on this. You need to be focused on this. And I have just not felt any kind of compulsion or clarity of vision at all for Sequence 2. Now, Sequence 2 should be kind of a clear vision for me already, because it would literally be the same format as Sequence 1, and then we would move into the next historical cycle. But even what that historical cycle should be has left me floundering just a little bit. I feel like I'm starting to get some clarity about it, but I'm still not sure yet. And so because I haven't had clarity, and I feel like the Lord has been focusing our energy more on stewardship during this Sabbath year. We're having a year where we're not doing anything new. So we've just finished up a stewardship project for Primer, where we completely revitalized that program because it needed it. It was wonderful and beautiful and good, but it could have been better, and it needed some changes to be an easier transition from preschool into the kindergarten year. So we've completed that, and now we are focusing on stewardship of our podcast and our YouTube channels and our blog and some of our freebies that are on our blog, and just trying to work on making sure that everything that we already have, that we've been given ownership of, is in its best state possible and serves our community the best. And so that has kind of been our focus now. And so the next thing is, what is the next thing? And the Lord has very much like on mission. We're going to start working on that again. Our next 4 countries are France, Indonesia, France and Indonesia. And I don't know, I'm blanking on the other 2, but I think that they're on the On Mission Mag website, what the next 4 are going to be. And so anyway, all that to say, I've just been waiting. I've just been waiting on the Lord for clarity and like a compulsion to move forward, and I just haven't had it. So I've just been waiting. Now, initially I did plan for Sequence 2 to be just an 1800s kind of thing. We were going to pick up at the War of 1812, where we ended with Sequence 1, and go through like 1912 and have an entire year of that period, and then another entire year of like 1900s through modern times. But I actually think I've changed my mind about that. So I'm glad that we have waited. I think that Sequence 2 is going to encompass a larger period of time, which I think is appropriate for this age group. when you're focusing on high schoolers, there is so much that happened in the 1800s and 1900s. They do each deserve their own year, really, because you can go deep on all of it. But as at this elementary age, when we're doing a survey, I think that there's plenty of time to get through that entire time period at this level. So, and that would sync up a little bit better with some of the other history cycles that are available in for the classical curricula companies that have history cycles. So that is one thing that I've changed as far as the plans for Sequence 2. I still don't have any kind of date. I've not started any kind of framework whatsoever. It's just still sitting there because I have a list this long of things that I feel like the Lord is focusing us on next before that. I have pondered the idea of Sequence 2 being more of a unit study, where instead of having maybe 3 or 4 units that we talk about we start with westward expansion, that we would talk about that would instead be a standalone unit study that would encompass the same pieces as in Sequence 1, but was a little bit easier as like an open and go implementation. And I don't know if that's what you guys would like. I'm trying to decide if that's what I would like first and then maybe make a sample or something and then share that. If you have thoughts about that, if you have thoughts about the existing Sequence 1 structure and maybe liking the idea of it being a unit study instead, then that I would love to hear from you. If you have thoughts about it just being a history and maybe history, geography, and theology and leaving out grammar and spelling and stuff, I would love to hear from you. I was thinking more for Sequence 2 instead of getting into more grammar, because that varies so much with these age groups. Maybe doing some writing that would be creative writing and stuff. That's a specialty of mine that I've always taught in co-op settings that I am actually really love to do. So I thought about that. Anyway, I have a lot of ideas in my head. I'm not sure about any of them, and that's why you don't see a Sequence 2. But I am more than happy to hear from you about, especially if you're a Sequence 1 user, what would you like to see or experience differently in Sequence 2? Or did you love it and you don't want a single thing to change? I would love to hear that from you. So now that's the segue into kind of the elephant in the room. We're Sequence 2, but the segue into what are we going to do? This is the first year that I've not done a complete program for my boys. So what are we going to do? Okay, needed to get my handy dandy notebook. All right, so the boys are going to be going into the 3rd and the 4th grade. And for those that aren't familiar, they aren't my only 2 children, but they are my only 2 children that are still of school age. I have 2 daughters that have already graduated high school, so I just have elementary students right now. So our spine for the year, instead of it being something that is a history-focused kind of spine that guides us throughout the year, is actually going to be agricultural science. And if you have, which is general classical creation, agricultural science, for those that are kind of new to general classical. And so if you have used our nature programs, the Nature Volume 1 or Volume 2, you're probably really familiar with the fact that they are meaty, robust programs. They're only 18 units, which could make it feel maybe small, but each unit takes you at least 2 weeks if you do everything. So in our teacher's guides, we have all the activities. We have these great kind of comprehensive book lists at multiple levels. And then you have the nature study strand, which is your local nature to you, that you're going to go out and find trees, flowers, and birds and learn to identify those, journal those, and record those, and get just very intimate acquaintance with those. There are some other kind of attainments from Charlotte Mason perspective. And then there's kind of the science topic of the thing too. So it's nature study and science, but it also has literature and copywork and narration. So instead of adding in other grammar programs, like, for example, first language lessons, first language lessons has a lot of narration and copywork. Writing with Ease has a lot of narration and copywork at this age. So instead of kind of doubling up on any of that, we're just implementing agricultural science to its completeness, and we're getting our copywork and our narration in there as well. So it absolutely has a very strong aspect of language arts. So science, nature study, copywork, narration, and literature are all being covered by agricultural science. Agricultural science, by the way, is really for third grade and up if you're new to that. Okay, history. So the big elephant in the room, since sequence 2 is not around, are we doing history and what are we doing for history? So I looked at, which of course I've been homeschooling for 14 years. I'm very familiar with many history curricula. And so I want to give a little bit of context for why I've made the choice that I've made, and maybe it'll help you as well. So we have used Mystery of History in the past. We have used Tapestry of Grace. We have used The Story of the World. I used The Good and the Beautiful one year. Oh gosh, I mean, I've used, if it's Omnibus when they're older, Veritas Press stuff. If it's a history curriculum, I have probably used it at some point. And they all have their strengths. But some of the programs that I would naturally maybe, like, I'm kind of doing our history in cycles, so it might make sense to do something like Mystery of History or Story of the World, because those are also in cycles, or Classical Academic Press or Veritas Press or any of those. But the thing I'll say about the Mystery of History and the Story of the World is that my boys still have really short attention spans. We've definitely worked on attention spans over the years, and they are respectful when we're doing school, but I can tell when they're really learning and engaged and when they're not. And after a certain amount of time, especially if there's no pictures or anything, they're just bugging out. And it's why I use picture books to the extent that I do, is because I think picture books are engaging for everyone. They're engaging for the auditory learner and they're engaging for the visual learner. And some kids, like, they all need to be able to listen to longer read alouds at some point, but when your expectations, like what your expectations about that are, will vary from child to child. So that's why we lean a lot into picture books, is because we get the meat, we get the story for the, if we're, historical fiction type stuff. But then we also like have beautiful images, and it kind of keeps them a little bit more engaged. And it's just been my experience and my perception that the other ones that I've mentioned they're not picture book based for the most part. Tapestry of Grace is, but I don't like it for elementary school. I'm sitting on my foot and now it's asleep. And it's just too expensive for elementary school. And so the rest of them, they have things you can add on if you want to do picture books. But since agricultural science is going to be our meat for the year, I want history to be very open and go. And this is outside of my comfort zone a little bit, because I'm a history first person. For 14 years, I have structured our entire school year and all the literature that we've read and everything that we've done, our field trips and all those things, around our history cycle. I'm a history first person. So this is the first year that we are going to be putting science first, and history is just going to kind of be a little sprinkle. It's not going to be a huge thing. So what I was looking for this year was something that would pick up after sequence 1, right? So I needed something that started around the early 1800s. Then I needed something that was open and go. Agricultural science is not really open to go. Like, it is after a certain point. Well, it certainly is for me, but there is a lot. Like, we have the activities and we have the notebooking, and there's a lot to do. It's very interactive. I'll put it that way. It's open and go for prep, but it's very interactive to the extent that you want it to be. And so I don't want the history to be complicated. I want it to be very just real. So my first thought was, I'll just do Story of the World or Mystery of History. I'll just open it up. We'll read from it. Maybe we'll do a project sometimes. We'll do some narrations, and that'll be it. And then I started reading through it. I'm like, they're just not going to enjoy it that much because it's just too advanced. Those books are written for upper elementary and middle school students, and for younger students to kind of come along and catch what they can. But if you're only dealing with younger students, they really aren't, I'm going to poke myself in the face, they really aren't the best fit. And so, in my opinion, for us. And so I actually am going with Knotgrass's Our Star Spangled History. If you're not familiar with Knotgrass, Mr. Knotgrass and his sweet wife, they so kindly sponsored this last gathering of rest. They sent devotionals for all the moms that attended. They were so sweet to do that and so generous. And I have never used their history curriculum. I've read through it and I liked it, but I generally don't go with a textbook history curriculum, right? So I came at it with fresh eyes and I looked through our Star Spangled Story. And it actually covers as much time period as sequence 1 and sequence 2 together. And what I like about it is I can actually go in there and there's like a whole bunch of lessons. I forget how many lessons there are. But we will, and for those of you that are interested in this, I'm going to be doing a YouTube video that's like an actual YouTube video walkthrough of our curriculum picks. So you'll get to see, if you haven't seen it before, you can see what that curriculum looks like. But we're going to just kind of start, I think lesson 8 is where we're going to start at, and we'll just pick up from there. It's totally fine the way that it's formatted to pick up from there. I love that it's very Charlotte Mason and that it is written in a very passionate, living way. It is not a dry textbook. Just because it is a hardback book that looks like a textbook with a lot of information in it does not mean that it is written like one. So it is very living. It has some images. It's not just nothing but pictures, but it has a lot of them. It's really engaging. The formatting is even like the text is larger and the spacing is a little bit further apart. So if I wanted the boys to do a little bit independent reading or have them sit and read along with me as I read, they could do that without there being any kind of eye strain issues. I just loved everything about it. And it comes with, you can get a literature pack to come with it. So I got that. And I don't know how many of the books we'll read, but they were all new to me except for, I think, one. So I was like, well, I'm just going to get this because I love a new book, right? So those are all new books. So we'll try to read as many of those as we can this year. And I don't know, it's just simple, right? So that's our history. I talked more about that than I planned to, but I want those that are looking for a sequence 2 solution to maybe look at Knotgrass, our Star Spangled Story, and see if you think it's a good fit too for your family. It may not be, but I really just think that it's so practical to use, but it's also rich. So sometimes when things are more practical, they can lose some of the depth and beauty, but the writing style and the presentation style in this makes sure that you don't. And so I think that that is like a wonderful mix. And it's just the right fit for us because we just don't want to have a year of like a million history books. We're focusing on agricultural science this year. For Bible, I'm actually, so I mentioned earlier that we have just kind of had this reboot of Primer. We've released the 2nd edition of Primer. We've made a lot of improvements. And one thing that we did was we added for the Bible reading, the Kingdom of God from Lithos Kids. And I haven't read that version with my boys, so we're actually going to read that, and we're going to reread theology. So we read theology over 3 years. We did Primer for a couple of years, and then we did sequence 1. And they were younger, and I just think it's such good information, and they just need that exposure again. So we're just reading that again for our theology and worldview, and also from Primer. So if you think Primer is just for kindergarten, listen up. We are going to go back through the 7 elements of art. We're going to learn Vermeer and Monet and Kandinsky again. And we're also going to learn the instruments of the orchestra again. And we're going to learn to Bach and Mozart and Tchaikovsky. So why are we rebooting those? The boys were so young when we did preschool and Primer and preschool and Primer. It's kind of, we went back and forth between those two for a few years before we moved kind of up to the next level. And honestly, they don't remember a lot of it. Like they remember Vermeer because we did the best job of implementing like the beginning of the school year, right? But the rest of it, like they're a little blurry. I think they know Monet. I never did very good with the composers. I stink with composers. And they remember some of the instruments, but they don't remember all of the instruments. And I would like, before we start shifting up into the middle school year, for them to really understand the elements of art and the different instrument families and so forth. So I'll be using the art pack from the art prints from the Primer bundle. I'll be using the instructions from the art and activity guide for some of those activities. And I will be doing the music cards for the orchestra instruments so we can learn those. And a story of the orchestra is what we use in that. So we're actually going to rehash Primer in part in the 3rd and the 4th grade. And we might go crazy and read a few Wonder Tales as well. So we'll just see what happens. Okay, math, we're sticking with Math with Confidence. Both boys love it. I've ventured away. I've done a little Saxon. I did a little Christian Light, but we came back to Math with Confidence. It just works beautifully for both of them. Reading, my older son who has dyslexia, we are continuing on with All About Reading. It is kind of our spine, but we are doing a lot less of the focus on the rules and a lot more fluency practice. So we are just reading and reading and reading. I got him a lot of the Pathways readers to work with this year. He did several of those this last year. And reading a little below his level is very, very good for him. So we'll read a little bit at his level to keep learning and progressing forward, and we'll read a lot below his level to keep developing his fluency. And then for my younger son, he really is almost out of reading instruction. So this is absolutely his last year of learning to read. And we'll be transitioning through the year to reading to learn. And so he has been using The Good and the Beautiful just because it was so easy. And people ask me all the time, do I recommend The Good and the Beautiful's language arts? And I'm going to say that I don't. And I say that if you don't know whether your child will have any issues with learning to read. Now, if you know that your child used something else and they are picking up everything the first time and they just naturally understand how to decode, and I don't even mean like gifted, I just mean they're like neurologically a typical reader, it's probably a very good fit. We do not use their workbooks. We only use the booster cards because those are so easy. We go through the card. We go through it maybe 2 times. He gets a sticker. He reads the related books, and then we move on to the next thing. He just intuitively learns how to read. Very much, he's like my first child I've taught how to read that just learned how to read without it being like, a thing. And so he's my first non-dyslexic child that I've taught how to read. My oldest daughter's not dyslexic, but she learned how to read in school. And so for me, like, he probably is a very normal reader, so he's had no issues. But as someone that has taught 2 other children how to read who have profound learning disabilities, when I look at some of the inconsistencies in the way they do their sight word list, there's just a lot. It's just, I'm being nitpicky. I'm nitpicky about it. So if you know that your kid's probably not going to have any issues learning to read and they kind of pick things up quickly, and then it's probably great. I love the booster cards. I'm not there for geography and I'm not there for art. So I don't want any of that other stuff. My son doesn't need the review. I use handwriting and copywork other places. We just don't need that workbook. So I just order like the booster card and the little readers that go with it. Boom, and we're in business. So that's super fast and easy. He's using the Booster C. We're going to fly through those and be done halfway through the year. And I'm excited about that because, I'll have completely taught someone how to read in like a normal amount of time. Don't tell my kids, but I'm really excited that happened for me one time. Okay, spelling is sequential spelling. I used this with my girls and I really liked it a lot. It is very open to go. It is very easy to use. It's very practical. Why am I not using All About Spelling? We love All About Reading because it is Orton Gillingham based and it is the program for kids with dyslexia. And like I've mentioned, I've got a couple. But what we do find over time is when they get to a certain point, there's just too many rules for their working memory and it gets to be too cumbersome. And they don't need to learn more rules. They need to just kind of recognize spelling patterns and reading patterns. And so we are working more on those patterns with my older son this year through some like word families to help increase the fluency because he learns the memorization, like he learns the rules very well and he does a good job at remembering when to apply them. But that process is so bulky for his like short working memory that it just creates a significant lack of fluency. And so the only thing that has made a difference for him is just practicing things, 7 times over until he knows it just from seeing it. Because when you start adding in a lot of rules, like I think there's a certain amount of rules and All About Reading and All About Spelling that are necessary. And you get to like open and close syllables and stuff. That's very helpful. But then past that, it can just start to get that you're spending a lot of time learning the rules. And then you have to remember to apply the rule. And then eventually you forget about the rule and you're just applying the rule. And so we're just kind of backing off of the first part of that. And we're just going to work on applying the rule without worrying about memorizing the rule, if that makes sense. So sequential spelling plays into that by fostering like more recognition with word families. And so Colton really also needs, that's my younger son, also needs spelling. I mean, he's in the 3rd grade, and we've focused very much, I'm a reading first person, let's get to fluency or relative fluency, then we'll work on spelling, because it can be confusing to try to do those a lot at the same time. So if you have a child that is struggling with reading and spelling at the same time, word to the wise, put the spelling away, get them fluently reading, and then start working on spelling. And that's going to be different for every kid, but for us, that's just what has worked well for us. So, and you won't know that until you try and you just figure it out. And the last thing is grammar. Daxton is still deep enough in his learning to read that I'm not too concerned about his grammar knowledge right now. That's another area that I don't get really deep into it. We've done some memorization about what nouns and verbs and things are, so he knows kind of some of the basic parts of speech, but we haven't gone beyond that, because when you're learning to read and you're having to do 2 reading sessions a day because of dyslexia, you just don't have time for that. And I don't want to bog his brain down with anything that's not necessary until reading becomes natural and second nature for him. So Colton is starting like his first official year of like real big boy grammar this year, and he is using rod and staff. And so we have used, I mentioned first language lessons and writing with ease earlier. Those are from the Well Trained Mind Press. I love those products. And if I wasn't using something like agricultural science that already includes copywork and narration and stuff like that, I would probably use first language lessons. But the difference is first language lessons is very interactive between the parent and the student. It is mostly oral with a little bit of writing. And you just have to sometimes choose and be real about how much time you have in a day. I am not such a purist in any way that I think a worksheet is evil. I like a worksheet, and my kids like worksheets. And so if they learn from a worksheet, like, I'm fine with that. And so we're not doing a worksheet for everything. We have a very rich and living education, but at the same time, there are some subjects that we just need a worksheet. And Rod and Staff is one of those programs that every child that I met when my girls were coming up through co-op, every child that I met when I taught middle school writing and grammar that had used Rod and Staff throughout elementary school had phenomenal grammar skills, and they just got it all. And so it just really was, I guess, a small sample size, but it made an impression on me. And it's just a very easy program to use. There's not like I can give him some quick instruction. He can practice it on his own, and then we can move forward. I try not to do too much independent work, especially at their ages. But at the same time, if that's something that he can sit down and work through while I'm doing reading instruction with his brother, then that is a perfect fit. So I guess the overall view for our year is it's going to be shifted in that it's going to be a lot more science oriented as our spine. We're going all in with general classical agricultural science, and I'm really excited about it. Our sheep are about to lamb within the next month. And so we're doing like the real hands-on situation. We just had some ducks hatch, and so we've got a lot kind of going on here on our little homestead that will very much foster. But my boys are like little know-it-alls sometimes, and they're like, I already know about sheep, Mom, but they cannot describe how a ruminant's digestive system works. So they're gonna learn some stuff this year that they haven't learned from wildcrats. They're gonna learn it from Mom, and I'm excited about that. And we're going light on the history. We're going open and go on that because that's what I need to do. We're doing a little bit of a rehash of going back through some of the beauty and the theology and Bible of Primer in its new format, which is going to be beautiful. Sticking with what we know with math, because hopping around with math curriculum is what creates the gaps. Sticking with what we know for reading with lots and lots of fluency practice, using a tried and true spelling curriculum that I know is open and go and works for my family, and then also using a grammar curriculum that will not put a ton of extra burden on Mom. And so the reason I share it kind of in that framework is to say, I love Charlotte Mason. I love classical education. We try to add as much hands-on, living, experiential learning as we can at our home. I mean, we have animals, like, when we're learning about animals, like we try to do as much of that as possible. We do field trips, we do living books, we do narration, we do copywork, we do nature study, we do all of those things. But also, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, and it doesn't have to be pure and perfect. And you have to sometimes let go of some of the ideals in small areas so you can live up to the ideals in the areas that matter. And so for me, the areas that matter are our science exploration, our nature study, copywork, narration, the beauty subjects, virtue, theology. Those are the things that I want to spend my time walking alongside my kids, focusing on engaging with them, leading them, and encouraging them in. And then I want them just to sit down and get their math done. I want them to get their grammar done. I want them to get their spelling done. And I want to get the reading instruction done as quickly as possible. Those are not areas that I love personally, so I'm not passionate about them. And they're kind of those utilitarian things like we've got to do them. They're good. They're for the glory of God. They increase our knowledge and our wisdom, and we've got to get them done. But not everything can take all that intentionality and all that time. The feast is robust, and some of the parts need to be like, what take and bake type things. You can do some of the things from scratch if you want to make this from scratch pasta, but buy the sauce in the jar. You know what I mean? Like whatever, or make your sauce from scratch and buy the pasta that's already made for you. Like you can kind of do that. That's okay. This is like your permission to do that. Activities for us this year we are continuing in jiu-jitsu and kickboxing, which the boys just both moved up a level and got belts they've been working on for a year. So that was super exciting for them. We will be starting NCFCA Speech and Debate Club next year. They have a juniors at our local area, and I've just been waiting till the boys were through with as much reading instruction as possible so they could really start doing some writing. So we will be doing some writing through little speeches that they write for NCFCA. They'll be doing football in the fall and baseball in the spring, and we have co-op all year long where they get a little bit more music and art and science and all those things too. So this was a little longer than I planned for it to be. I am going to be doing a YouTube video that is like an actual physical flip through, show you kind of things, but I have to get my agricultural stuff printed for that, and I just need to be a little bit more organized. And it's been raining and I couldn't send the kids out to play today to do YouTube, so I'm sitting in my car to do podcasts instead. Anyway, thank you for joining me with Homeschooling with Grace today. I hope that this was a helpful podcast, that it was encouraging, and you can always reach out to us at any time through our website, shopgentleclassical.com. That is linked in the show notes, and we can answer any questions that you have. Have a blessed day.